Great to see all of you here, and it all feels like a warm, intelligent, mission-driven community. So I'm honored to talk a little bit with you about this. I have a nice presentation with lots of pictures. I am originally a designer, so I express myself in visuals most of the time. But I also like writing, so I'm writing my second book at the moment. I'll tell you a bit more later if you want to know. But yeah, so Julie, thank you for the short introduction on WSS and the Phoenix system, which I definitely would like to know more about. Like, how does that platform work? What tools are in it? What's accessible? What is still under progress? And we have our own tools, so maybe, you know, how can we contribute? Everything that we develop is open source and freely available. So you can steal, copy as much as you can, which is like one of our principles. So shall I start, guys, showing you a little bit of presentation? It shows you a little bit about who we are, what we're doing. It tells you a little bit about some of the core concepts of the framework that we've been developing in order to do our work, called Symbiosis in Development, SID. And then I have a few little example projects on various things we've been doing, and then show you a bit about the Orchid City framework, which is basically the latest and greatest outputs of our collective agency. And then I think maybe we can have a bit of conversation about that. How does that sound? Yeah, very cool. All right. Let me see if I can find the button to share my screen. I think. Did that work?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so this is how we communicate these days on how on who we are. As you said, Julie, I started this when I was 19, which is in 1999. So this is about 25th year of running this organization. And yeah, in those 25 years, the way that we've communicated about what we do, what we're trying to achieve, who we are, the way that we do it has constantly changed, because we are chasing behind the vocabulary that we need to be able to express ourselves, because a lot of people find terms like systemic transition or holistic integrated approaches and things like that very abstract and very hard to grasp. But the core of it really is that we are trying to actually effectuate meaningful change on the ground. So even though some of the things that I might be showing to you may seem rather conceptual and theoretical in nature, that is simply a tool in order to effectuate actual change on the ground. So that's why I'm focusing my examples a little bit on those real on the ground projects. You're seeing one right now, which I'll get into with some more pictures later, and that one's in San Francisco, so it's not too far from some of you, I believe. Our mission as an organization is to create the foundations of a sustainable society. And with that, we mean that we are not, so we're not saying we're creating the sustainable society, because, well, we can't do that by ourselves, but also we are focused on, since we are rather early to the game, to help to lay down some of the groundwork. Like, how do we do this? What does a sustainable society entail? What are the tools that are necessary for us to involve all required stakeholders, to have a financially equitable system underpinning some of these things? What are the technical necessities? How do we bring together teams? How do we do our analyses? What data do we need? How does that get expressed? What is the phasing, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really on the ground trying to effectuate that real change. And at the moment, I think we've been involved in about several hundred projects worldwide. So I'll give you a little bit of a view on that. So we communicate these days that we are a strategy, concept, and development office that works on systemic, integrated, sustainable projects. That being said, we're factually a non-profit. We've never emitted any profit. So we're reinvesting all of the profits we earn from our, say, commercial projects back into our own innovations. So we don't just provide advice and services. In fact, we just do these things to earn money so that we can execute our own initiatives, which are usually a bit further ahead than what the market is asking for. And because we've been doing that for such a long time already, being one of the first offices to actually do this full time, we weren't anything else before. We weren't an engineering firm or an architecture firm or a consultancy or an accountancy before. We have always been this. So that means that there's always been a recognition that various disciplines come to the table, that it shouldn't be approached from just a scientific or just a political or just a financial or just a business perspective, but these things need to come together as equal components within the development trajectory. And I think that has allowed us to foresee a lot of developments that are taking place, and we've been able to be consistently kind of on the cutting edge and being almost like the lone scout out there in the field, you know, getting all the scratches and detecting the terrain, and then adapting that into our frameworks and communicating that back open source to the early adapters and so on. This is a little bit of a somewhat complete map of the various projects that we've done. Some projects don't have a geographical base, like some of the software tools or the principles and methodologies. So these are all the projects that really have a kind of a geographical focus. As you see, we've not been too active in Africa or South America. We've been more active in the Western world, in Europe, Northern America, and in the last 3 to 4 years, quite active in Southeast Asia. We've also done some big projects here in the Middle East, and it's been incredibly enriching as a person to have been able to learn from all of these different cultures, to have been able to see how to operationalize some of these vague abstract concepts like regenerative agriculture or circular industries or ESG corporate frameworks or something within these vastly different geographical, political, economic, and social contexts. And that experience is really, really incredibly valuable, both for our work and for me as a person. It really provides me with a lot of extremely valuable mental assets that really help to quickly think through the various pathways that we can try to really achieve something. This is us these days. So we're not very big as a group, consisting of some scientists and researchers, some designers and engineers, as well as business people, management, and business modeling experts. And none of them really has the emphasis. It's really a collaboration between those. And with that, as an entity that provides advisory to other parties, we work on city planning and architecture, always cutting edge sustainability projects, no matter what they are. We work a lot within the industry and food production. We work on sustainable environments, living environments like resorts and housing communities. And then on a corporate level, we help with strategy and circularity. For example, for Heineken, we are a Dutch company, it's a Dutch brand, so that's an easy one, but we also work abroad, most of it, for example, with IKEA, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. And as a consequence, a lot of people have been asking us in those last few decades, so really, can you tell me more about how we can do this ourselves? Like, how does your framework work? What is sustainability really? How can we embed that within our organization? Or can you support us in kind of finding our own way? And from that, we've started developing training, master classes, all kinds of educational, semi-co-creation, facilitation processes that usually are used for all of these projects, for us to really make a coherent team, make everyone live on the same platform in terms of knowledge and insight, speak the same language, and then be able to be more effective in working together. And that's really also a core of the things that we are doing. So to the outside world, we present these services as we can be hired to help do research and analysis, also based on systems thinking, to then develop strategy and concepts, which usually result in a roadmap for the next 10, 15, 20 years. We can then help execute by doing design of master plans, products, or buildings, and then help to manage these projects from beginning to end, including all that training components. So that's the provider side, and then we use every project that we do as an opportunity to also contribute more towards the framework that we use, which is symbiosis in development, and then continue to publish all of that for free and open source. So the core question that symbiosis in development, which is, again, it's the framework that we use to arrive from the central question, like what can we do? What direction should we go at? What is really important here? How can we arrive at an effective transition roadmap? All of those questions, they are supported by the framework in a variety of steps. So I'll explain you a little bit, very high over. The documentation for SID is freely downloadable in digital form. The 450-page illustrated book with hundreds of case studies is also for free, and I'll show you the website of that later. But the core of the framework starts with the question, what is sustainability? And the reason why that has become the core of it is when I started at the end of the 90s, and I started working on sustainable projects very, very early. So we had to go through a lot of cynicism and a lot of backlash, and like, why are you wasting your time on this? And why does this matter? And can't you just, go and develop apps for mobile phones because you make a lot of more money in that? So that sort of stuff to get through it. No, we wanted to work on sustainability. And then we started working on an initial projects. And we very soon found out that when people talk about sustainability, and that's still very much the case today, everyone has a different definition. There's no unified definition at all. There is the United Nations official definition, which is the Brundtland Committee's definition, which you may know. That definition, let's see if you're all still listening. Does any of you can quote the official United Nations definition of sustainability?
Quote it? No.
If I say it, you'll probably go like, oh yeah, that's it. So let me
Development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations.
Perfect. That's the one. So it's actually a definition of sustainable development, not so much sustainability, but there's nuances. But exactly, Carrie, I think you said that. The beauty of that definition is that it's very inspirational. It makes you think about future generations and their needs, which is absolutely essential. So it brought to humanity the understanding that sustainability is a time-sensitive concept. And that it's about, generations, and it's about meeting needs and things like that, which is great. The only problem is that if you really analyze it, it's not a definition of sustainability, it's the purpose of it. So it equates a little bit to saying that the rules of soccer, or the definition of soccer, is to get more balls into the goal of the opponent. Because that's really kind of what the definition says, is like to meet the needs of the present while also being able to meet the needs of the future. But it doesn't say what it is. And that is incredibly infuriating if you're trying to create a definition that you can test against. Like, am I working on something that contributes to sustainability or not? Is very difficult because you can't call up future generations. They don't have a voice. And what their needs will be is also not necessarily all that clear. So we've been deriving new frameworks and new understanding of sustainability, and that definition is this one. And I'm just going to read the first bold output. The rest is kind of example. That sustainability is the state of a complex dynamic system, which is our society. And in that state, the system can continue to flourish without leading to internal collapse or requiring inputs from outside its defined system boundaries. Now, that's quite a lot of words, and I'm sure it doesn't immediately land with you, and that wasn't the purpose. Our purpose wasn't to create an inspirational new kind of talking marketing thing. We wanted to create something really substantial that we could test against. And we've developed this together also with the School of Environmental Studies at Yale, together with some people from Delft University, and been testing this and revising this until it came to the point where it was solid enough for us to actually build the rest of the framework on. And the rest of that framework of symbiosis in development has started to contain various aspects of theory, which this definition is a part of. Like, what are we really doing? How do we unravel this? How can we test this? What are the different segments that we need to take into account? What level of abstraction do they work at? How can we make them operational, and so on? Then there is a method, which is how do we as a group of people actually use that to go step by step through the process? And then there's a process, and the process helps to really plan the whole thing within this many months, with this budget, with these milestones. We together will be walking through these systems analyses, interpretation, synthesis, design, business model, feasibility, etc. So to make it all the way to what am I doing on a day-by-day basis. So we're going from the very abstract to the very concrete all together in that framework. And we use it on a daily basis, and it's a tool for us to use. So it's in itself is not its purpose. That's also why we're not selling it and giving it away for free, because we just want it to be as useful as possible in order to help create those foundations for a sustainable society. Now, quick overview of some of that theory. So if you really dissect that main definition, you get to these three core words, maybe a little bit small for you on the screen. I'll zoom in a little bit. So that means that a sustainable system, be it a city or a large community or a country or a region or the whole planet or whatever you wish to define that boundary as, needs to have three core properties. And those three core properties are resilience, meaning a sustainable system needs to be able to withstand unexpected disruptions. That's what resilience means. It's you cannot predict what's going to happen. And in order for you to continue to survive, you need to be resilient in general. And there are things that you can do to increase and reduce resilience against unexpected external influences. The second one is that you have to be autonomous to a certain degree, specifically to those resources that are life-giving, typically water, food, power, but also autonomy in decision-making, autonomy in the sharing of resources and so on within that system. And last but not least is what we call harmony, which means that a system is equitable internally so that there is no internal reason for collapse. EA, strife, war, that sort of thing. So that's where social justice comes in, that's where equity comes in, that's where access, affordability comes in, and so on. So these are aspects that live out on the system level. Now these then get subdivided into network parameters, and network parameters are aspects of the system that contribute to more or lesser degree to these parameters. So they include connectivity, circularity, transparency, awareness, and so on. They are interactive with each other, and within each system that you study, you can use them as terms to start analyzing how things are connected and figure out the system dynamics that are at play, so you can figure out where your leverage points may be within any given system. And then these are fed by the object parameters, as we call them, which is this stack. It's called LC, where we created a categorization system for all things that are physically in existence. So we start with energy and materials, as this foundation, which is the physical world around us, on which life is built. The ecosystems first was the soil, the air, the climate, the oceans, so on. And then biodiversity and the species live as a subcomponent of those ecosystems. And we as a human society are a subcomponent of that, with our culture as a base, our economy as a subcomponent of that culture, the exchange of goods and services, and each individual being a part of that economy with health and our happiness as some of our core dividers. And so for each project, we subdivide these. So we maintain these categories, we subdivide them, we unravel the system and can look at it. And by doing so in the same way each time, you can jump over different projects and start comparing them together. And this is proven to be both a system that is allowing us to continue to be creative without fixing things in checklists that say you have to do it like this, check, 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 while at the same time providing a uniform framework that allows us to communicate clearly with each other, subdivide projects, and then assemble and manage them in an effective way. So we found the middle ground between creative freedom and necessary strategy freedom and adaptability to a very clear framework that allows us to subdivide the work and get to very big, complicated things and be able to manage them effectively. Now, those are a lot of words about the framework. Let me just skip on this. So these are the processes that you then go through, and then they result into these kinds of roadmaps or action plans where teams of multiple disciplines are actually working side by side and can fast track them so that you can really quickly speed up trajectories that seem to be very long and arduous. But by integrating co-creation and these co-creation sessions, we've been able to speed them up. So the systems analysis that we're doing are often expressed in visual charts like these, and they help various stakeholders to quickly understand complex systemic relationships. In this case, this is a real map of the energy material flows of a packaging company in the United States. It's been anonymized, but otherwise it's a real trajectory, which allows to see throughout the supply chains, both upstream and downstream, what their various impacts and resource uses are. But it doesn't have to be resource use. This can also be value or social connectivity or financial leverage or whatever it is. So we make a lot of these different maps for each project. So not just one by one, but for the different layers that I was just talking about, we have different kinds of maps. So this is another type of map. It's too complex for you to currently fully understand, but this is a full supply chain with all of the energy materials and all of the major players all mapped together. And this is a tool for us while building it throughout the process together with the stakeholders, that everyone starts to fully understand those contextual aspects of a project. And they are fundamental to the understanding and then being able to plan real systemic change projects. This is what that can look like in actual real life, how they're produced. This is not just some people sitting behind a computer quietly working away. These are often these co-creation sessions where for several days in a row, we have 20, 25 people, all stakeholders and experts together working on this with paper and pens and whatever tools they have to really materially land that in the space, within people's heads, and really talk it all out. And within those 3-4 day sessions, you can manage to jump months ahead in the process by avoiding having once a week online meetings that are very ineffective, and where during those days you can really get to the core of things, get alignment, get full understanding, and then be able to accelerate the trajectories. So that was a little bit of a background on how we do these things. This is a book that you can download for free in PDF form. You can see here, it's quite a thick one. And this is the website. So it has its own website called thinksit.org. You can also find it through the Accept website if you want to. There's also training materials, etc. So let's go to a couple of example projects. This is a project that was finished in 2019. I have not personally been able to visit it yet, which is kind of interesting. It took 14 years to develop, and it is the world's largest ecosystem rooftop on a redeveloped transportation center. So this was the original. This is what was called the Transbay Transit Center before, a very much unloved piece of concrete right downtown San Francisco. And we got the assignment for the architect and the developers to develop a sustainable concept to transform this into something that could give back to the community. And that's really the core of what we do, is we look outside of the project and we try to see how can we maximize the contribution of whatever we are doing to the sustainability of the community around it. So we're not interested in making things just energy neutral or water neutral or something, because that's just taking care of yourself. But you need to start contributing to the sustainability of the world around it for it to be a catalytic, really systemic change-making project. And that's what was our challenge here. And, you know, middle of the 2000s, got into a lot of backlash. Of course, it's going to be expensive and who is going to pay for it and so on. So we developed a whole integrated business model for it so that the city never had to pay a penny for it. So the whole project, and these are the photographs of I think about a year and a half ago, the whole project is financed through the rise in property values of the surrounding property. So that is quite amazing. So it's got a fully circular ecosystem where it regenerates all of the rainwater that comes from the surrounding buildings, buffers it as a storm buffer, generates biodiversity, cools down the urban heat island effect, provides a place of leisure, a place of relaxation for the mind as a public park. It's a great example, but it actually contributes financial value to the surrounding properties, and by thus it could be paid for entirely through this rise in property values, which is very unique, and quite proud of this. They say, yeah, sustainable projects are expensive and the business model doesn't always work. Well, there are ways that you can do it given a certain context. This is another project. It's much smaller, but this is an example of a project where we paid for and developed it ourselves. So in a way, you could see that we earned money by doing this, and then we put it into that. And this is a sustainability community in the Netherlands. It's also our office. And we took an old, disused, kind of abandoned heritage building, and that used to be a train repair station. And we renovated it according to our own principles to be the highest possible performer that we could in a heritage building. So that's also not using any greenfield, and showing that heritage buildings can actually be upgraded in that way, as well as ensuring that this didn't cost 1 penny more than a normal renovation. So we had a developer come in to make a quote on the construction cost for upgrading this towards an office just normally without mentioning sustainability. We got a quote. We used that as a baseline and a target, and the sustainable renovation didn't cost a penny more than that original quote. And now it is a thriving center where about 300 different professionals from 20 different companies work, and all of them are focused on sustainability. So we've got experts in water, in wind power, in solar power, in waste management, in intellectual property, in marketing, architecture, project management, social aspects, cultural heritage, you name it. And they all work together as separate entities, as on joint projects as well as on their own. And this is the mayor of the city of Utrecht opening it. It was opened in 2017. and as well as its physical execution, meaning that it's entirely circular, using only bio-based materials, using only social labor as its construction input, and being energy neutral as a whole. So quite proud of this, I have to say. It took. I have some gray hairs. They're probably from this project, but we managed to do this and really show it that this is possible. And it really opened up the possibility to just show this project and go like, look, if we can do that, then we can certainly do this. And that's what we're trying to do now also in Vietnam. We're trying to copy this and put it in Vietnam, which is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, to ensure that there, where the new factories are being built, where new cities are being pumped out of the ground, we can be there with that knowledge and to allow them to leapfrog. At this moment, we're looking for investors to help finance that project, which hasn't been easy. We had investors, but there was a market crash in Asia, so we lost the initial investors. And that means, just like this UCO project took 6 years with a lot of gray hairs, the VICO project in Vietnam is also walking against its own speed bumps, and that just means we have to be tenacious, crawl up again, try again. But if you know of any investors interested in, it's quite a lucrative project with a high financial return, but what we're really doing is make significant changes within the community in Asia where it really matters, where the world's factories are being built. Just to show that it can also be done on a small scale, this is a very lovable little project, which used to be just a parking lot behind the theater. This is literally what it looked like. It isn't much bigger than this. It's a very small area, but we got the commission of the local municipality with a very small budget, and they said, look, you guys have been doing a great job, but can't you do something like for our little community here? And that's become this wonderful little project where we designed this climate adaptive park that's collecting all of the rainwater from the surrounding roofs and the park itself. And it has these water adaptive systems in it that sometimes there's a pond, sometimes it's a play field, including the integration of art, biodiverse planting, cultural events, and using it as a way to gather and inspiring the local community who helped to facilitate and build it. So here you see the before, and here you can see the after. It's been open for about 2 years now, so not all the plants have really come in. Here on this photo in the bottom right, you see it being mostly dry, and here you can see what happens after it's been rainy for some time. So you can see this complete transformation of like some ugly gray little backyard to a green, lush, beautiful, biodiverse, climate adaptive thing for very, very little money with some local artists and the art all integrated. So that's just an example of something small. The IKEA project is a project which I'm very proud of. It is more abstract in a sense, but it demonstrates that this systemic approach also works on a large multinational corporate level. And there's a lot of articles on this project on our website with a lot of little impact studies and analyses which if you find it interesting, I encourage you to read. But make a long story short, within the few years that we worked with IKEA, we were able to transform the IKEA catalog, that little piece of paper that they now phased out due to our project as well. In a period of 10 years, started to use it as a catalyst to transform the entire global paper, pulp, and print industry. So instead of just focusing on making the IKEA catalog sustainable by itself, we used it to increase the sustainability of all of the companies that were associated with its production worldwide. And that starts to make sense if you understand that IKEA is the most produced book in the world, more than the Bible. and also more than number 3, which is the Harry Potter series. That's, interesting anecdotes. But these printing companies and these paper companies, they don't just produce the IKEA catalog, they also produce newspapers and magazines and lots of other stuff. And the IKEA catalog was a big enough assignment for over 350 companies each year that we auto-generated sustainability reports for each company that participated, scoring them, moving the signposts each year, and then making those companies commit and pledge often millions of dollars to increase their sustainability performance in order to be able to participate in the tender. And that allowed those companies to use their sales department as a force to promote sustainability within the organization, instead of what's typically the sustainability officer that often doesn't have a budget and no mandate. And that had a wild success. And it lasted for about 10 years. And during those years, we were able to phase out the catalog while its effects are lasting throughout the industry. So that's really one of those great things where we basically use something small to have a very big effect on the world. Okay, so I'm arriving at Orchid City. How much time do I have left, Julie?
Well, our meeting goes for another hour, at least another hour and 10. So this is very interesting.
Okay, great. I just want to wrap the story of Orchid City, which is very dear to my heart, a little bit in a story of why we started working on this. So I've shown you some of the projects we've done before. There's a couple of other projects that I didn't show where we've been involved quite heavily within agriculture, regenerative agriculture on the one end, and advanced greenhouse agriculture, from vertical agriculture, aquaponics, hydroponics, and so on. It was about, I think, 3.5 years ago, it was about a year before Corona started, where I leaned back and I thought, okay, I've been working for 2 decades now on this kind of stuff. And where are we going with this? Because even though I do believe in the power of the projects that we have done in the past, I do still feel that they are just a step up from the conventional, and that there is a long way to go. They are still projects that live almost as little statistical outliers of what is in general a system that is entirely unsustainable. So how do we as a society actually concretely work towards a real sustainable future society? That is a huge question. Like, what does that transition pathway look like? And how can we actively contribute to it, besides saying that we're doing all of this, developing the methodology, and doing little projects left and right? I was not satisfied with doing that. So I leaned back and said, what is something that is kind of within our power as a small organization that could actually become a roadmap of making that real long-term societal transition that is concrete, that is practical, that is feasible, and that is like real, like it's something that is hopeful within a world where each day you open the newspapers and you read about another thing that science came up with, that where we're walking against a systemic wall, whether or not it's biodiversity or here got a few of those, right? We've got the climate challenge aspects that I'm sure I don't need to tell you about all of those aspects. We've got the ecosystems and biodiversity challenges that also heavily impact our agricultural systems. We've got our resource shortages, which are constraining us in many different ways, specifically the energy, water, the land, and the food challenges. And we've got the economic aspects, where we want to have equitable finance, which is a a gargantuan task in itself. The infra mobility things, the job market, and all of the social challenges that are wide and diverse. So when we really look at this, how can we make something where each one of these components are addressed to the extent where we feel, okay, it may not be 100% complete yet, but this is truly a major step in the direction of a sustainable society. And that's where we see that the built environment is where all of this comes together. And that's really something where we've had most of our experience. So myself I'm an industrial design engineer by trade originally, which is products, vacuum cleaners and stuff. But then later became an architect and an urban planner, and then sustainability expert. The built environment is really something that connects many of these things. It's where legislation comes together, where finance comes together. It's where our social equity manifests itself. It's where the agriculture, the food is created within that spatial realm. It's where the supply chains of major manufacturing come together. It's where it is the stage where we live our lives. So we were thinking, if we can paint a dot on the horizon of this, which then also brings it really close to the individual, like really close to me and you and Julie and Megan and Cheryl, Carrie and Nancy and so on. Like we all live somewhere and we all hope to have a living environment that is inspiring and beautiful and that can last for generations. So how can we bring all of that together? And that's what Orchid City became. So Orchid City really is it's a fully self-initiated project by us, started about 3 years ago. And we used the Corona period in which we couldn't really travel. And we had a huge downturn in our commercial projects. So we kept the team alive by investing heavily into the research and then the design and the business models for Orchid City. And they are now ready to the point where we can go out and are looking for investment to develop, to set up the development organization that goes around and practically find areas of land where we can build, design, invest, and build the first of its kind. So what is an Orchid City then? And what then is important to note is that this is what we arrived at, right? What we were starting as, those were our values, that was our core. And this, what I'm going to show you, is the result of that effort. This isn't what we initially thought it would be, but it is what we arrived at, and we're exceptionally happy with it because we had the suspicion, as we usually say, that if you just do individual sustainability measures, for example, you introduce a energy neutral energy system within your community, then you have power and that has a lot of benefits and you have reduced your CO2 footprint, but it certainly doesn't necessarily help the loneliness of the elderly that are living there, right? Energy system. So you are kind of doing this patchwork where one by one we're trying to upgrade our existing system, which is important and valuable, but they're not necessarily helping each other yet. Now, if you add a lot of these sustainability aspects together, they start helping each other. And that means from both a performance aspect, that you can have a higher performance for the same investment, but it also starts helping from a financial perspective, where by adding them together, they start reducing each other's costs and start increasing the performance. And by putting it all together, we create a business model and a resilient, fully realizable and affordable system that outperforms pretty much everything else. And that was a realization that we had after those years. So let me show you how that works. So first of all, what is essential in that is that each one of the major programmatic aspects of our built environment need to be put in close proximity to each other so that both on the energy material resource flow as well as on the financial and governance flow, they are operating as one unit. Which doesn't mean that they all geographically have to be connected, but they should be somewhat within the vicinity of each other. And that's what is where we live, where our housing is, where we learn, our schools, education systems, where we produce. There's both the agriculture as the industrial production, the entertainment, where we, the arts and culture, as well as the working, the offices and all of the professional services that connect all of these together. And preferably, the more you integrate that, the more benefits you can have from it, which is pretty much exactly the opposite of what we've been doing, specifically in the US. US town planning is mostly a division of program where we live over there and we produce over there and we do agriculture way over there, very far apart, which then generates the need for transportation to a degree that that just debilitates society. By integrating it and combining it together, using all these new approaches so that it actually is possible, you eliminate more than half of all of the transportation need, which is huge, which reduces how many roads you need, how many railways you need, how many cars you need on the road, how many parking spaces you need. So it has a huge benefit just by doing that on transportation alone, but there's other benefits, and I will show that to you. Another thing, by the way, is we've collected now about 20 different partnerships of different organizations that are contributing their expertise and their know-how to Orchid City. So we've got architects, we've got landscape people, we've got engineers, water pump people, energy systems, governance, finance, and so on, that all can contribute to help execute. And what is really important is that these three words, that it's realistic, feasible, and specifically affordable. So that means that Orchid City is designed to have quite a substantial amount of social housing, that the houses that are, whether or not they're social housing or not, are actually affordable for the representative of the community, so that we are not building utopian technological castles in the sky that can only be afforded by the very wealthy. That would be the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. So the things that come together here beyond that integration of program is the foundational backbone of using regenerative ecosystems and agricultural systems to power basically the ecosystem powered energy material flows. I'll get back to that. To have that community oriented program that is built on a human scale, where there is generational inclusivity, which means that we're not building elderly homes far away and removed from everything else. Housing for elderly, housing for students, housing for low income, medium income are all integrated and merged. And that has particular benefits. It has downsides, but it has more benefits than it has downsides. And one of the big benefits is that communities can live and stay together. As soon as you get older, you don't have to leave your house or your community just because the elderly home is 100 miles that way. It is ways that we can have what's called generation-proof living, so people can stay in their houses, subdivide their houses, and things like that. So there's a lot of nitty-gritty detail to that, but it's very powerful. Then the culture and climate adaptive resilient design, which is mostly a landscape affair. How do we deal with the water? But the culture adaptive has to do with the flexibility of program. How quickly can it change? How does it listen to the local community? How can the local community have agency in order to actually execute and create the cultural program that they need? The climate adaptive design has a lot to do with working with nature instead of against it. So instead of building high levees to protect you from high water, allow the water to come in on occasion when it is, and then channel it in a way that it can actually have some constructive, productive uses without being destructive. And these are things that we in the Netherlands have gotten pretty good at, because as you probably know, our country is for more than half underneath sea water level. We also are a river delta, so the river flows that we get from Germany, France. If it rains a lot in, you know, the Alps, then we get all the water from the other side. So we're stuck between the sea and those rivers. And there's been a lot of serious experimentation and successful implementation of these strategies for climate adaptive design that work totally different than just pumping your country full of concrete and then shivering behind the wall, hoping that it doesn't break. Very different way of working with that. Then the meaningful jobs. Actually, each Orchid City provides as many jobs as it has people that need a job. So we're being job neutral, we call that, which is essential for its economy. And we generate those jobs by using regenerative industries that are circularly connected to the rest of that community. And because that's developed at the same time, that is quite a powerful move. So we basically, each Orchid City is not just it's not a housing neighborhood. It is a living neighborhood in which these job producing industries are an integral part of the whole. So we're breaking that also down in terms of that methodology that I was telling you about before, the symbiosis and divine. So we have the goals on the resilience level, on the autonomy level, and the harmony level, where we have created the system to be entirely self-sufficient for all of its basic daily needs, or actually we say weekly needs. So we have water and energy, we have food, we have waste management and so on, all of those things. Those are kind of daily necessities, but also weekly. So your bicycle repair shop, your health center, your cafe where you want to have a drink with friends. You don't use them on a daily basis, but more or less on a weekly basis to be self-sufficient on that. Then on a social level, it needs to be affordable. If it's not affordable, it's not scalable, and it's not a solution. To be inclusive, to make sure that it's not just generational, but also culture-wise, gender-wise, ethnicity-wise. However, you know, we can define inclusive to be able to be open in that sense, and to promotion of diversity within those programs. And on the resilience level, to build on that regenerative backbone, to be climate adaptive, and to be generation proof. So that's kind of the core of that mission. And in this diagram, you see basically, it's a complex diagram, but it's a simple representation of how the energy and material flows actually enable that. So we have the energy components that mostly come from sunlight, a little bit of wind. We have the ecosystem services by regenerational agriculture to provide lots and lots of additional benefits, including biomass, water filtration, a lot with the water management, providing the jobs, providing construction materials, providing educational opportunities, landscape for sports and recreation, and so on. So we've got that ecosystem as a base, and then we have the human activities in pink that bring everything together and allow this to be a kind of a mostly closed circular resource loop. Now then, the Orchid City framework, the way that we've been making it is like there's no one size fits all. We've been around long enough. We've been designing neighborhoods, houses, buildings, projects around the world to know that every location, even if it's in the same region or even just right next door, a project you have already done, each condition is unique. So it's not a design. That's why we call it a framework, because each place has its own stakeholders, both from a human perspective as from a natural environment perspective, that need to be expressed within the execution and the development of such a place. So Orchid City is a development process that allows us to upgrade existing neighborhoods. So it doesn't have to be a greenfield where you build a new place. No, it can be used as a trajectory to upgrade existing places, or remediate brownfields and build something new on top of that. It can be used to augment, to add things to existing and then use that to upgrade, and it can be used for something entirely new. So all of those conditions are where it can be used, and it can be scaled from fairly small, 500 inhabitants. We're not reaching 100% self-sufficiency there, but it's still quite beneficial. To from about 5,000 inhabitants, we get over 90% self-sufficient. And then there's all kinds of different variants that you can imagine. Some of them will have more agriculture and other ones will have less because of practical reasons. And we fully understand that, but in its framework, it's flexible, can be applied to any culture, any climate, any context. And that's where we've been testing the project. We've been developing 3 prototypes, designs, not built, in the Netherlands, in Vietnam, and in Brazil. And these pilot plans are working with local stakeholders to actually calculate it through like you would for a real project, including the finances and all the real estate and the legal issues and so on, to see if it holds up. And it does in all 3 of the countries. And now we are looking at potentially starting the execution of the first small ones in Ethiopia. And there's a project going also in Suriname. And we are, of course, still on the lookout for locations in the Netherlands and Vietnam. I would love to put North America on the spot here, because I believe both the United States and Canada are, in some areas, ideally suited for the application of something like this. There is the space, there is the willpower, there is the infrastructural quality in order to support it, but we don't have a big network. So we would need a local partner to help finance and then find the land and support with the land acquisition in the development and so on, in which, that's that trajectory. So yeah, geographically speaking, the reason why we picked the Netherlands, Vietnam, and Brazil is because of its diversity of, first of all, landscape. So Vietnam's in a river delta, Brazil's in the mountains, the Netherlands is kind of grasslands, but also a very different climate, very different culture, very different economic realities, and to allow us to test the extents and what the limits are of the trajectory. So here you see the Orchid City design, pilot design for Vietnam, which is in the Mekong River Delta. And here you can very well see that water flowing through the neighborhood, which is part of that climate adaptive strategy to allow for flooding and to allow for a smart way to manage these changes in future water systems. So you see there's a few satellites, which are smaller kind of clusters of different pairs of program. And we have the cores. The cores are more urbanized areas with higher density, as you can see here. So this is basically what a core's density would be like, to 3, 4, 5 levels. And the more rural aspects, which are these lower density in terms of housing, but high density in terms of performance, building agriculture, doing water filtration, having recreational zones, and so on. So this is kind of what they look like. All of them, whether or not they're an urban density or a rural density, they have an extremely green expression. And that is because of all of those ecosystem services, and because this is basically the essential future of the built environment, because of the ecosystems being so incredibly valuable and so important for us to continue to support them and to surround ourselves with it. They provide so much value to us. The way that we've been building our concrete jungles, I think many people recognize that that's just simply not the way. And the way that we do this is financially extremely resilient. So it works on the finance, on the infrastructure, on the experience level. So you do see quite a big difference in density. So here we go up to 8 levels in these kind of campus-like buildings. And here we only have small 2-story buildings. And when you're looking at the water like this, You may think, oh, that's very nice, but you know, it's expensive to build. Everything you see and everything that has been implemented within the Orchid City framework has multiple functions for everything that we do. And that's where the power comes from. So, for example, this water isn't just a pond. It's part of that climate adaptive, resilient design. So it's basically your water management infrastructure. It is also the conduits, the channels that bring water throughout the project to the various agricultural fields. You know, agriculture requires a lot of water. So it's your agricultural water management system. It's also, and all the planting you see surrounding here are phytoremediation systems that continuously filter and clean the water. So they are from gray to potable water filtration system. And fourth, it is a source of entertainment and real estate value. You may know that buildings built next to water have a higher value in that sense. So we have at least 4 of these values that come together in what then looks like a nice piece of water. And that's how all of that is kind of intertwined and helps it to achieve its effect. It's a nice example of a real world project where we are currently applying Orchid City in a small community in the south of the Netherlands, where there's expansion plans for a neighborhood to attach to an existing rural village. And we've been applying this and using the framework almost like a prototype testing phase together with the municipality to analyze how to maximize the impact of that new neighborhood without having too many cost overruns, how to integrate the watershed, the ecosystems and so on, and then build the program. So this is in Dutch, but don't need to explain that much. On the left is kind of the program that they initially suggested themselves. And then through these phases, we go towards an Orchid City phasing, which is quite different from what they initially thought would be a sustainable neighborhood. It's actually less green, more food agriculture, more water than they initially had, less infrastructure. So we were able to balance and provide this as a framework to really provide some good policy advice to this community, which then turns into quite extensive roadmap with all of these different aspects. And then a neighborhood design, which is quite different than the one they had before. So the results at the end of the line of us developing this framework, and for any project that would apply this to, let's say, to 80 to 90% of the implementation of what I just told you, the results, what came out of it were just remarkable, and they're still stunning to me. Just to talk about climate change, like what happens if you build a neighborhood like this instead of the normal way of doing it? Understanding that they are not particularly more expensive, right? Is that we are saving 140% CO2 footprint per person for people that live in an Orchid City, as opposed to a normal average living condition. And 140% means that someone who's living there isn't just climate neutral for themselves. No, they actually help to compensate 40% for someone who doesn't live there. So each Orchid City is a massive carbon sink. So we're not even talking about, we're talking about way beyond carbon neutral, talking about beyond some basic carbon positivity. We're talking about genuinely regenerative. So building an Orchid City will reduce the world's climate load. And that is just fantastic. And most of that comes from that regenerative agriculture aspect of it, completely dealing with the landscape differently and doing all of our water management, water purification with those ecosystem services. Then to produce 100% of its food requirements, not by just, putting in lots of greenhouses that make tomatoes. No, with a diverse diet of more than 180 different products, being grown through at least 12 different agricultural systems and methods, including greenhouses, open field, silvopasture, aquaculture, and so on, that all compensate and become one resilient system that is community owned and professionally operated. So we have for this been calculating with about a 60% reduction in cattle for meat production. We're not entirely eliminating animals from the food system, because in some cases animals are very productive, very useful, and can be had in an ethical, animal-friendly way. But there is a very large reduction of that, which is a choice. That's a choice. Then on the jobs and education front, we have for 30,000 people, we produce 30,000 direct jobs, which boosts the economy, provides for all of the jobs that are necessary. And by doing so, creating a community that can revitalize rural communities. So a lot of rural communities around the world are suffering from brain drain, and there's no future, there's no interesting jobs for the younger generation, so they go away, and slowly the community dwindles and dies, even though it may have some economic value or some agriculture that's functioning. But we see that around the world. And by doing so, having this broad set of jobs, not just the agricultural ones, but also the IT and the production and the high tech and the arts and the culture and so on, we create a vibrant and self-regenerative community. Then economic-wise, it is incredibly profitable if you are a real estate developer investing in this, and you keep to retain your value over a long period of time. And yeah, I think that maybe some of us are less interested in it's profitable for the investors, but it is important if we leverage billions of dollars, which is what it costs to build whole neighborhoods and cities. You need to have a very solid business model. And even the most fiscal conservative person will need to be able to get on board. Why? It's because a neighborhood, a community, a city doesn't have a target audience. We're not just going to live together in a little enclave of 100 people that all feel that we need to rescue the world and let the rest of the world perish. It needs to be a model where everyone can feel at home, no matter where you're from, what your perspective is, what your political alignment is, how you look at the world, how you look at money. And that means that it needs to be kind of a project that fiscally makes sense from beginning to end. And it does. And it doesn't just do that for the investors. It does it for the community members. It is actually cheaper to live in an Orchid City than in a normal town, about 10 to 15% lower daily living costs, which is quite substantial. And it is also financially beneficial for the local community outside by tax returns and the ability for it to generate economic trade and activity that helps to economically benefit, let's say, the state that it is built in. Then the land and water regeneration should be self-evident. I think we can regenerate brownfields through phytoremediation. It really regenerates all of the land that it goes towards, and we can restore beyond 100% of natural biodiversity for everything that wasn't fully lost. So the implementation of all of these programs, the project itself has more than 30% of wild nature that helps to regenerate local habitats and ecosystems. And I think that this is, I mean, it just makes me really happy. It's one of the things to get out of bed for. If we are able to do this, I mean, we are not there yet. We need a lot of support. We all need to contribute to this, to try to arrive at things like this. But the fact that this is what the math actually says, that it's possible, it's affordable, we can build it today. We don't have to wait for any new technologies. There are no funky new technologies used at all. You can, maybe they'll help a bit, but with just everything that's just right there on the table today, we can do this now. And that is fantastic. So on that front, nothing is stopping us. On the legal front, there are no substantial laws that would need to be changed in order to realize an Orchid City. We can do it, everything within the current legal paradigms. There are some stumbling blocks, like, you know, doing your own water purification is difficult in some areas, but because this is in a municipal level, there are ways that you can address this. And it's still not going to be easy, but it is perfectly possible. And so the only thing that stands in our way is the awareness that we can do this, and then get the parties together that have the resources to support making this happen, and then us making this movement in order for it to be executed. And I see that happening within the next few years. I do. So that's the end of my slides. I hope to have given you a little bit of the hope and passion that I feel now for Orchid City, and how we've got there through these hundreds of projects culminating into Orchid City.